to the process where we will be getting buckets for the November 17th, 2016 slate. My name is Stephen Porter. You can follow me on Twitter at Stephen Porter Jr. Let me get 1 second to sign in on YouTube. And should be good to go. Sorry guys, I'm not great with the technological aspects of all this, but it looks like we're good to go. All right, we've got a 5-game slate tonight. Highest total on the board is the Portland Trailblazers and the Houston Rockets. Total is 221, and I believe Houston is a 3.5-point favorite. Let me check that. Now, Houston's a 5-point favorite at home. Total is down to 220 now. Both of these teams are terrible defensively. Portland is one of the worst at 107.3 defensive rating. Houston is not much better at 105.5. Both of these teams are pretty solid offensively. Portland 103.4 and Houston 107.6. They're not the fastest teams in the league, but if both teams manage to have offensive success, which I think it's pretty safe to project them to have today, they could probably get up in pace a little bit. Houston is the much better rebounding team, 52.5 rebounding rate, where Portland's only 49.8. I think that actually bodes well for Clint Capella. Capella has seen his minutes trend upwards. He's getting in the mid to upper 20s now, which he hadn't been earlier in the year over his last 3 games. His usage rate is at 18.5 for the season. Not great, but with what he's going to give you on the defensive end, blocking a lot of shots, collecting a lot of rebounds, and getting a bunch of easy looks at the rim thanks to James Harden's penetration. I think he's actually a really interesting play tonight. Definitely a guy I'm trying to fit into my cash games at only 5.1K. Probably my favorite play, price considered, from Houston tonight. James Harden is obviously the highest projected player on the slate. He's got a 33.2 usage rate for the season. If you followed along yesterday, you knew that I was all over him, but he did not quite live up to expectations. I think his usage rate against OKC last night was like 27.8. So about a 5.5% drop from where he's usually at, but I think we could probably project him to go back up into the low to mid 30s tonight against Portland. Already touched on how they're a terrible defensive team. Nobody on their roster has the size or strength to stop Harden. He should be able to do pretty much anything he wants. The one concern I have with Harden is his outrageous price tag. But if you look at the games that Harden played against Portland last year, he, I think, topped 40 real points twice, had like a 75 and 80 point Draftkings game. It's very, very reasonable for him to pay off his 12K plus price tag tonight because it's such a great matchup. But considering all of the other plays on the slate, I think I might pass on him in cash games just to be able to get a bunch of guys that I really like in the mid-range into my lineup. But I will definitely be making some tournament lineups centered around him. You can't completely fade his immense ceiling in this game. Next guy to consider for Houston is Eric Gordon. He's got a 22% usage rate. Going to play a ton of minutes. If this game stays pretty close, he's probably going to get a good amount of shots. He was the biggest beneficiary of Harden's decreased usage yesterday. Got his usage rate up to about 24 in that game. 5K on Draftkings. Shooting guards not the best. If you don't want to play Harden, I could totally see just playing Gordon and Capella to get cheaper pieces of this game in cash, and then just move on to the other guys on the slate. Ryan Anderson, 18.4 usage rate. I just don't really like playing Ryan Anderson. I think he's always got a nice tournament ceiling, but not a guy I really want to play today. Other side of the ball, we've got Damian Lillard at 32% usage, coming off a pretty poor game. I think he gets it going tonight against Houston. We touched on this. There's just no defense in this game, and he should come out and do pretty much whatever he wants. I think CJ McCollum and his 27% usage rate are also interesting in this game. I think there's a very real possibility of both Damian and CJ making value on Draftkings. If I'm going for cash games, I might just take the $2,000 savings again and just play CJ in this matchup. Like I said, like them both. I think that they both have enough usage in this high total matchup to pay off the price tag. But like I alluded to, I think there's a bunch of other guys I want to get in there today. Mason Plumlee has a 17.8% usage rate on the season. I think he's interesting, at least as a tournament play. I'd probably rather use Capella than him in a cash game, considering they're right at that same price point. And another guy I'm actually pretty interested in on this slate, especially on FanDuel where his price is pretty attractive, is Mo Harkless. Harkless has a 15.4 usage rate on the season. He's playing a ton of minutes without Al-Farouq Aminu in the lineup. He'll miss again tonight. And I think Harkless could definitely just kind of produce a little bit in all of the categories and get you there tonight. If you want to play a bunch of studs, like if you want to play Harden in your lineup, especially on FanDuel, you're going to need to save. And I think Harkless is somewhere you could go there. Not as interested on DraftKings, where his price tag is a little bit higher. Rather, again, probably go with Capella or even Plumlee on the same team as him. But I think he's at least an interesting option for tournaments tonight, and another way to get a little bit of cheaper exposure to the highest total on the slate. I think if I had to guess, I would say that Portland is going to start Myers Leonard to match up with Ryan Anderson. It's certainly possible that they could run Alan Crabb in the starting lineup again and push Harkless down to the 4. But I think, like I said, I think Myers Leonard is probably a better matchup with Anderson there, and Harkless will probably play the 3 and match up with Trevor Ariza. Moving on to the next game, we've got the Philadelphia 76ers traveling to Minnesota to take on the Minnesota Timberwolves. Total is at 210. Minnesota is 11.5 point favorites. Biggest spread on the night by far, but I'm not too concerned about Minnesota blowing anyone out right now. They've actually been really poor on defense, especially their starters. They're a little banged up in the second unit, so I think that's going to be awesome for all of their starters. It's a cake matchup. Philadelphia has a 106.7 defensive rating, pretty poor, and the Timberwolves should have their way offensively. They've got a 109.9 offensive rating, one of the best in the league. So I think they will definitely come out and be able to get buckets at will. And hopefully for us, if we're going to target them in daily fantasy contests, they'll give up plenty of buckets as well to keep Philadelphia in the game. The Wolves starting 5 actually has, I think, 117 defensive rating as a unit, which is just terrible. And again, is going to give us hope that Philadelphia can stay in this game. Andrew Wiggins at 30.7% usage rate is the usage leader in Minnesota. I love him tonight. I think he's an awesome play. Love his individual matchup. Love the amount of shots that he's taking. Just love the game in general. I'm definitely looking to get him in all of my cash game lineups tonight, as well as probably most of my tournament lineups. I think he has a 40 real point ceiling, which would get you there alone, and then he can obviously, in a matchup like this, add some defensive statistics and rebounding and assists as well, even though those aren't normally his forte. Karl Anthony Towns, second on the team with a 26.3% usage rate. He's definitely interesting in this matchup. He's got a tougher matchup with Joel Embiid. Could get into foul trouble. Wouldn't be the first time we saw that. And I'm a little more interested in paying for Hassan Whiteside moving down, but he's an awesome play one way or another, has an insane ceiling and probably a 40-point-ish floor even if he does get into foul trouble. So I think he's a great play tonight. One of my favorite plays, especially for tournaments today, is Zach LaVine. LaVine's got a 21.4% usage rate. He's playing a ton of minutes. Coming off the last two, Minnesota's coming off matchups with the Clippers and the Hornets, two of the better defensive teams in the entire league. And I definitely think that he's going to get closer to his ceiling tonight against Philly. We've already touched on how bad Philly is. And his ownership might be a little suppressed considering he hasn't really blown the top off in the last couple games. But I'm definitely looking to either get off of Wiggins to LaVine or maybe even play both of them in my tournament lineups tonight. And I think he's definitely a solid cash play as well. Could see some time as the backup point guard to Rubio. But one way or another, Philadelphia is terrible against guards, and you have to love his matchup. Moving on, Gorgie Jang's got a 13.8% usage rate on the season. Really good rebounder, doing a lot of producing a lot in the defensive categories. It's definitely in play for a double-double tonight. Should see plenty of minutes. Like I mentioned, Minnesota is kind of banged up in the second unit, and the matchup doesn't get much better for him. I think he's an interesting tournament play on Draftkings at 5.7K. I'm not sure I'm going to go there in cash just because I think there are better maybe ceiling or point per dollar plays at the forward position. Ricky Rubio has a 13% usage rate, which is terrible, but gets about as good of a matchup as you could possibly hope for with Sergio Rodriguez. Definitely going to get a lot of assists tonight. Probably going to get a lot of rebounds. Wouldn't be surprised to see him rack up a couple defensive statistics. Philadelphia's got a 16.9 turnover rate. That's pretty poor, one of the worst in the league. So he's definitely got some upside there. Always has triple-double upside. Don't think he's going to get there, but it's certainly possible. I think he's definitely in play in cash and or tournaments on both sites just because of his price point and lower ownership. Like I said, the matchup doesn't get much better, and he'll probably come in closer to his ceiling tonight. Moving on to the other side of the ball, we've got Joel Embiid, the process, and his 40% usage rate going up against Karl Anthony Towns tonight. It's kind of a situation where Karl Anthony Towns is there's a little narrative street here. Joel Embiid was kind of Karl Anthony Towns before Karl Anthony Towns was Karl Anthony Towns, and obviously he had to sit out a couple years with that injury, so I'm not going to be surprised if JoJo goes out and just goes right at Cat tonight and tries to kind of assert his dominance. We've seen him be able to do that pretty successfully in a lot of matchups this year. So I think that he's definitely going to have offensive success. Like I mentioned, the Minnesota starters have a terrible defensive rating. They're giving up tons of buckets. So I think he's very much in play in cash or tournaments. Probably a safer floor if you want to go Capella at 5.1K. But like I said, I think JoJo is in play one way or another, cash or tournaments tonight. Would expect him to see up close to that 24 minutes cap that he has, and I think he can kind of give you some 20-10 with some blocks upside. He's way cheaper on FanDuel, but he's been a better play on DraftKings just because he's turning the ball over a ton, and he's also hitting some three-pointers, so it's always nice to get that three-point bonus from your 7'2" center play. Moving on to the next highest usage leader in Philadelphia, that's Jahlil Okafor at 28% usage. We saw him produce again last night in about 24 minutes. Got up to, I think, around 28 DraftKings points, which is going to do it for you in cash. Definitely not a tournament option. And he's actually somebody you need to monitor. It's possible he won't play in this game, considering it is a back-to-back for the Sixers. So if he's not sitting, I think he's an interesting play, at least in cash games if he fits for you, but I don't think there's enough ceiling to play him. Next two guys to consider for the Philadelphia 76ers are Dario Saric, 21.4 usage, and Ersan Ilyasova, 19.4 usage. Probably not going to play either of these guys if Jaleel is playing, because they're just going to soak up between Embiid and Okafor. They're going to soak up too much usage to play any of the fringe guys for me, even though, like I mentioned, I think this is an awesome, maybe a little bit underrated matchup for them because Minnesota's been really poor defensively. So if Jaleel's out, I think they're actually both in play. Wouldn't hesitate to run either one of them. I actually liked whichever one was going to come off the bench. I thought Ersan was going to come off the bench last night, but he ended up starting. And then Saric came off the bench and gave us a really strong performance against that terrible Wizards second unit. If Jaleel would be out, I'd probably like whichever one comes off the bench again, just because JoJo takes so many of the shots with the first unit. Sergio Rodriguez, 18.4 usage rate. Tough matchup with Rubio, who is a pretty solid individual defender. Somebody I guess you could play just because it's a good matchup team-wise, and he's playing a lot of minutes and has at least a respectable usage rate, and he always has the ball in his hands, a lot of assists. Robert Covington has a 17% usage rate. Just not interested in him given the layout of the slate. Going to move on to the next game. The Knicks are coming to Washington, D.C. to play my Wizards. The Wizards are actually 4-point favorites in this game, which is kind of weird considering how poorly they've been playing. The total is at 209. John Wall is set to play a full complement of minutes today. He had a really efficient game as far as fantasy points per minute go last night against the Sixers, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him have a lot of offensive success again. One thing to monitor here is the fact that Bradley Beal is questionable, and he may play in this game. If he plays, I'm going to like Wall a little bit less. But assuming that he's out, I think Wall is an awesome play. I think he's a cash game play, and I also think he's a really, really good tournament play. Great pivot off of Dame or Harden as the more expensive guards. Wall's carrying a 37.6% usage rate without Beal in the lineup, which is 4% higher than he does with Beal in the lineup. So he's taking over a lot more of that offensive responsibility. The Knicks are a 107.7 defensive rating team. I think they're still the worst in the league at that rate. Wall has serious home road splits. I'm not worried about Derrick Rose at all. And after getting completely embarrassed by losing to the Sixers last night, I really expect the Wizards to come out and play with a little more intensity, give a little more effort tonight, and I think John could absolutely blow it up. He's got 60, 65 point ceiling. If Beal's not going to play at only 8.8K, that's pretty good. He should see closer to the 36 minutes, to the average 36 minutes tonight. In 24 minutes last night against Philadelphia, had 42.5 Draftkings points. Extrapolate that out, and he would have had about 63 Draftkings points. Wouldn't be surprised to see him on that pace again tonight without Beal. Second on the team in usage when Beal sits is Markieff Morris at 21.3. He's got a tough matchup with Kristaps Porzingis tonight, giving up like a half foot there, and Kristaps is being a little more aggressive, and Keefe has been prone to fouls. So I don't know that he's a cash play. Definitely an interesting tournament play. I don't think anybody's going to be playing him, and he certainly has some 2010 upside with some defensive statistics in his range of outcomes. Otto Porter, 16.7% usage rate, which is pretty much even with what he's doing when Beal is on the floor. But Otto is playing like 40 minutes a night because the Wizards' second unit is just so pathetically bad. He needs to be on the floor if they're going to have a chance at winning any basketball games. So I think he's definitely a strong play. I liked him last night. He crushed it last night. Wouldn't be surprised to see him do that again. He's going to have a tough time with Carmelo on the defensive end. He always struggles with those guys that are a little bit bigger than him. But I don't think that should have as much effect on his offensive success. He's rebounding the ball really well. Definitely think he can give you a point rebound double-double. Wouldn't be surprised if he gives you a couple assists and a couple blocks and steals. Maybe not what we saw last night against Philadelphia. but certainly enough to make him a strong cash or tournament play at 6.5K on Draftkings. I'm not sure he's going to have a ton of ownership tonight, so definitely somewhere I'm looking to go in tournaments if I'm going to pivot off of Wiggins at the small forward on Draftkings. Marcin Gortat's got a 13% usage rate. Just not super interested in him tonight. He is playing a ton of minutes, but I'd rather go for a Capella or a Plumlee at a cheaper price point with probably the same kind of upside that Gortat's going to give you tonight. So I'm not really looking at him at all. Onto the other side of the ball, I mentioned yesterday that the Knicks have finally kind of figured out that they need to get the ball to Kristaps Porzingis so that he can shoot it because he's their best offensive player. He, over the last 4 games, has a 28.5% usage rate. That's actually climbed over Carmelo's 27.8. I would expect that to continue tonight. I don't see why it wouldn't, especially when Carmelo and Rose came out after last night's game and were really impressed with Kristaps' performance. I think that should continue. The Wizards have been very bad on defense, 105.4 defensive rating. Their starting unit's actually been a little better, and I really like Markieff Morris as an individual defender, but I'm just not sure that it matters to Kristaps at this point because he is just such an immense individual talent. At his price point on both sites, I think he's an awesome cash play. I think he's an awesome tournament play. A guy that I'm definitely looking to jam onto all of my rosters. Wouldn't try to talk you off of 100% ownership with him tonight. Guy I'm also looking at targeting in this game is Carmelo Anthony. Like I mentioned, 27.8 usage rate. He always toasts the Wizards because, like I also mentioned, Otto struggles with guys of his size and strength. Should be able to do pretty much whatever he wants on the offensive end. And the Knicks are projected to be coming from behind tonight, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him play a hefty amount of minutes. Kristaps actually played 40 minutes again last night. That's pretty impressive, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him up 36 plus again tonight, even though it's a double, the second end of a back-to-back. He's like 21. He's good to go. Derrick Rose has a 23.7% usage rate over the last 4 games. Just not really interested in playing him ever. John's a great individual defender. Like I said, should be very motivated after the complete embarrassment yesterday. I think he comes out and gives a strong effort tonight. Not really looking at Rose. Justin Holiday is maybe interesting as a punt because Wizards second unit is terrible. Holiday's averaging 23 minutes over the last 4 games. He's got a 15.6% usage rate. He can produce in all categories. Just an interesting punt that probably not a whole lot of people are going to be on. That's probably going to give you a little bit of upside. Joakim Noah and his 14.5% usage rate over the last 4 games is kind of frustrating. It's hard to peg when he's actually going to play significant minutes. When he is playing minutes, he's actually being relatively productive in the rebounding and assists categories. I think it's possible he plays a bunch of minutes tonight because it seems like he's playing more minutes when there's a true center on the other side. And like I mentioned, Gortat is playing a ton of minutes here. Not sure they'd be too hesitant to play Kristaps at the 5 against Gortat. It's not like Gortat's a real bruiser or anything, but I think Noah's at least in consideration as a punt for the center position in tournaments. Probably not going to have a ton of ownership, and like I said, if he does play 30 minutes, he might see a little bit of upside in this game because the Knicks should have some offensive success. Moving on to the next game, we've got the Milwaukee Bucks traveling to face the Miami Heat. The Heat are 3.5-point favorites in a game with a total of 200. Not sure if Goran Dragic is going to play for the Miami Heat tonight. He is questionable. I'm going to assume that he is not playing. If he does play, pretty much going to take me off of anyone on the Heat side except maybe Hassan Whiteside. Without Dragic in the lineup with the last couple games, Dion Waiters is leading the team with a 29% usage rate. Hate playing him. He's an option. I'd rather play Hassan Whiteside from this team. Milwaukee's actually pretty strong on the glass, 51.5% rebounding rate in comparison to Miami's 48.6%. But I think that Hassan has kind of proven himself to be matchup independent. He's going to go out there and get his boards and blocks and points no matter who's on the other side. John Henson doesn't really have the strength to stop Hassan from getting to where he wants to on the court. Don't think anybody else on their roster does either. So I would expect Hassan to see plenty of offensive success tonight. We always know he's got that triple-double upside with the blocks. Probably not going to get there, but it's happened before, worth mentioning. Hassan's got a 24% usage rate, and he's probably my favorite center play as far as raw points go on the slate. And if I'm not going to pay for James Harden, I think it's actually relatively easy to fit him into your cash games. So I think that's probably where I'm going to go. Moving on, I mentioned Waiters and his 29% usage rate. He's only 4.6K on Draftkings. I don't think I'm going to use him in cash, but obviously somebody who's got a really high ceiling. He still got 18 shot attempts up against Atlanta in their last game out. He just didn't make any of them, which is always a concern with Dion. But Milwaukee is not quite the defensive team that Atlanta's been. Atlanta is second in the league in defensive rating, whereas Milwaukee is posting a 102.9, which is kind of more middle of the pack. So Dion could rebound a little bit here, and I'm sure he'll probably be under-owned in tournaments after his underwhelming game last time where he was pretty popular. If Dragic doesn't play, I'm really interested in Josh Richardson. I think he's a great cash game target on both sites because his price is still pretty low. Richardson has a 20.7% usage rate over the last couple of games without Dragic. He played 38 minutes last game against Atlanta. I wouldn't be surprised to see him in that 36-plus range again tonight against Milwaukee. He seems to be over that knee injury he had suffered. I think he gives you a pretty strong floor with even a little bit of 45 DraftKings point upside. I think he's a really good player, and if Dragic isn't out there to take a bunch of shots, then Richardson should definitely see usage over that 20% line that we're always looking for. James Johnson is another guy to consider here. He's got a 17.5% usage rate without Justice Winslow in the lineup, and it looks like Justice isn't playing again tonight. So he's definitely somebody to consider at his 4K price point on DraftKings. Probably a pretty good, maybe a tournament pivot off of Trey Lyles. If you don't want to go with Lyles in tournaments, we'll get to him a little bit later. But definitely somebody to consider. Don't think he's a bad cash game target. Not all over him in tournaments because I don't see an easy path to 30 to 35 points, but he's done it before. And I think it's certainly in his range of outcomes, even if he's probably not going to come down close to that ceiling tonight. This Rodney Magruder fellow, no idea who he is, but he's playing a ton of minutes. Saw, I think, 37 minutes last game against Atlanta and put up 21.5 DK points. That'll get you there if you want to play Harden in cash and you really need a punt, or if you just want to play all these other guys in cash and you really need a punt at shooting guard. I think Magruder is a guy that you could look to without Dragic in the lineup. Next guy, probably last guy to consider from the Heat without Dragic would be Tyler Johnson. He's got a 17.6% usage rate and 32 minutes a game without Dragic. I'm not really falling over myself to roster him, but I think he could get you up to 30 to 40 DraftKings points if things go well for him. So he's certainly a target in cash. Probably not going to play him in tournaments, but if he works for you and there's no Dragic, I wouldn't try to talk you off of him. Moving on to the other side of the ball here, we've got Giannis Antetokounmpo at 29.4% usage. I love Giannis as a player. I love the matchup for him again. Josh Richardson is actually a little bit taller. He's like 6'6", and he's not a terrible defender. But again, there's just really nobody that's going to slow Giannis down, so that's not going to take me off of using him. mentioned yesterday that Giannis has been more productive in games where the Bucks, it's a close game for the Bucks, or they're trailing, and the Bucks are 3.5-point underdogs tonight. I see no reason not to use Giannis tonight. I think I'm going to get him into my cash games. I think, again, like I said, I'd probably rather just pay up for him and Whiteside and Wall and all these other kind of 8 to 9K range guys instead of going all the way up to 12 for Harden. So again, Giannis, great play tonight, tournaments or cash. Jabari Parker, second on the team in usage at 28.4. I think he's another great play, especially because Justice Winslow is sitting out, not as deterred against playing guys against the Heat. The Heat have been really strong on the defensive end, 99.4% defensive rating on the season, but they should take a hit without having Winslow in there. Jabari, another strong cash or tournament play, only 6.3K on Draftkings. I think he's a little bit underpriced there. Don't really love the Bucks rotations in general. The one guy that did kind of pop out to me a little bit is Tony Snell. Snell is playing 32 minutes a game over the last 4, and he's got a 13.2 usage rate. Not really too exciting, but he is somebody that might be able to get you to, that 20 to 25 DraftKings points that you're going to need out of him in cash at only 3.2, and he does have shooting guard and small forward eligibility. Moving on to the last game of the slate. We have the Chicago Bulls traveling to Utah to take on the Utah Jazz. Total is 192. Jazz are 3.5-point favorites. This game would normally not be super attractive given the really low total in comparison to all the other games on the slate. But we have Rajon Rondo probably going to sit out of this game. I would not expect him to play. Apparently he's dealing with an ankle issue and he is doubtful. I'm not 100% convinced that this ankle issue isn't more of he's not a good fit for our team issue and we're better without him. I think they might be motivated to sit him even if he's 100% healthy. So if this ankle issue is real, I don't think he's going to play, which will open up a bunch of minutes for Jerian Grant. Jerian Grant is 3.5K on DraftKings, 4K on FanDuel. I think he's an awesome play in cash games just because of the minutes floor that he's giving you. He did have I think 19.4% usage rate in the last game where he started, which isn't terrible, especially considering when he's playing alongside of Jimmy Butler and Dwayne Wade. He actually stepped right in and supplanted Taj as the third offensive option there. So I think he's really interesting in cash and tournaments. Wouldn't necessarily expect him to put up the same kind of stats that he did against Portland. We talked about how bad Portland is defensively. Utah is typically better than that, but they're a little bit banged up. Only 100.5 defensive rating this year. Dante Exum is a much better defender individually than Shelvin Mack is, and Exum has been starting. If Exum starts again, which I would assume he does, a little bit of a downtick to Jerian Grant, but I think he's got a pretty easy path to that 21-point DraftKings performance that he needs to give you in cash games with a little bit of ceiling for more. I'm definitely going to have some of him in tournaments, but I'm not going to go 100%. I think he's actually a pretty interesting fade and maybe a guy to be underweight on because I think it's more likely than not that he comes in under 30 DraftKings points today. And maybe if he goes, 20, 25 DraftKings points and he's really heavily owned in tournaments, you can increase your ceiling over the field by going elsewhere tonight. So like I said, definitely a cash lock on both sides for me. Going to have some in tournaments, but I'm not going to just lock him into every tournament roster I have just in case I can get a leg up there. Jimmy Butler, second on is first in the team in usage. at 27.6%. He is the true alpha dog on the team, even though Rondo wanted to make us think preseason that there were going to be 3 alphas on this team. He's an interesting play, definitely a good cash game target because you know that the shots are going to be there. Chicago's actually under their 3.5-point dogs in this game, which I thought was kind of interesting. Chicago has been one of the most impressive teams in the league to me this year. Definitely think that they have a good shot at covering the 3.5, if not winning this game. Their 54% rebounding rate is the tops in the league this year. Think they match up really well with what the Jazz do. The Jazz normally are going to rebound the ball and play tough defense. And then Chicago might be able to beat them at their own game a little bit. Also, like the individual matchup with Jimmy Butler against Gordon Hayward. Gordon Hayward's a really good player, but Jimmy Butler is just in a different tier than Hayward is. So I like Butler over Hayward for sure in this game. Not sure if I'll use Hayward at all today, just because I think there are so many small forwards I like better than him. Jimmy Butler being one, Otto Porter being another one, and then Andrew Wiggins being the third. And like I said on FanDuel, Mo Harkless is a pretty good punt option at 4.6K. So Hayward, not in love with him tonight. Butler, maybe not the ceiling that you want to see for tournaments up against Utah. But I'll definitely have some, maybe a little underweight on the field. But I think he's a guy that always has a crazy ceiling one way or another. The matchup isn't a huge deal for him because he's just such a good basketball player. Dwayne Wade, second on the team in usage at 26.8. Definitely somebody to consider. Not all over him tonight, but I think his ownership is probably going to be down. Interesting tournament target. We know that he has some ceiling, but I'll probably go with Jimmy Butler and Jerian Grant in cash games from Chicago. Not really interested in Taj Gibson. Robin Lopez is interesting because he'll probably play a bunch of minutes against Rudy Gobert, but it's probably not something I'm going to do. And then Nikola Mirotic and his 9.9% usage rate is the main option for the Bulls off the bench, with Doug McDermott out with a concussion again. I think he's an interesting play, probably not somebody I'm going to use today, but I guess he gives you a little bit of ceiling in tournaments. Again, just on the matchup or the total in general. On to the other side of the ball for Utah, mentioned Hayward. He's been the usage leader with Derek Favors, who should be out, and George Hill, who should also be out this year, at 25.6. But like I said, his price is pretty high, and there are just better options, I think. In cash games, I wouldn't, I guess, try to talk you off of using him in tournaments, because I think most people are going to kind of side with me that there are better plays and overlook him. And he's a good basketball player. He could certainly get there in this matchup. I'm just not projecting it tonight. Trey Lyles has a 24.8% usage rate without Favors and Hill in the lineup. He should start. It's probably Rodney Hood's probably gonna play today and might take a couple of shots away from him, but with his really low price point and all of these expensive guys in great spots, I think he's definitely a play that can be made in cash games. And I think I'm gonna go probably the same way I'm going with Jerian Grant, and that I think he's a cash game lock because of his increased minutes and usage today, but maybe at least going underweight on the field in tournaments, because I think there's definitely a possibility that he comes in with only 20-25 Draftkings points and definitely underwhelms and is a very popular option across the industry in a way to get a leg up by fading him. Dante Exum has a 19.4% usage rate. Don't love him. Probably going to play Jerian Grant over him, but I guess he's in play. Rodney Hood is definitely going to be in play if he starts, and it's looking like he's going to. He's got a 20.6% usage rate without Favors or Hayward. And like I said, I think Jimmy Buckets is a really tough individual matchup for Hayward, so there may be a funnel effect towards Hood taking more shots. definitely an interesting play. He's a lot cheaper on FanDuel than he is on Draftkings, but I think he's in play in cash or tournaments on both sites. Shelvin Mack has been seeing a pretty strong usage, 18.1 off the bench, but just not somebody I'm going to play ever. And he's in play as a punt, I guess, but not somebody I'm going to use. Rudy Gobert and Joe Ingles, I guess, deserve mentioning. I never play Rudy Gobert. Doesn't take enough shots. Isn't efficient enough with the shots he does take. And Ingles is interesting when all these other guys don't play, but with Hood back, I'll probably stay off him. But he's an interesting tournament punt who definitely carries, a 30-ish point upside. So that'll do it for tonight's slate. Thank you for tuning in, and best of luck in your games tonight.